Picture a building, 5 stories, brick face, wooden interior, 40 families. Now imagine it's the most densely populated place on the surface of the earth. More people per square mile than Calcutta. More languages in a single block than most countries can count. Now add no heat except what the stove gives you, no toilet except the one in the courtyard 4 flights down, no window in the room where you sleep, and a wall with a crack in it that lets in November like it was invited. That's New York City Tenement. That's the Lower East Side of Manhattan, 1910. But here's the thing nobody tells you before you go in. The misery isn't picturesque. It's mathematical. It's a specific number. A number that wakes you up at 3 in the morning and sits at the foot of the bed and will not leave until you've run through it again, one more time, in case something changed since the last time you ran through it. In 1910, that number, for 500,000 people in this neighborhood, is $12. $12 a month. The rent. The thing that everything else bends around. Tonight, right now, on this particular Friday night in November, you're $7.32 away from losing everything. Not metaphorically, literally. Because rent is due tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock and you don't have it. So I make these history stories, and I genuinely don't know who's out there at this hour. Maybe you're a researcher. Maybe you can't sleep and you needed something to fill the dark. Maybe you just wanted to hear what it sounded like when a city asked everything of the people who built it and gave them just enough back to keep them building. Either way, get comfortable. Here we go. Your name is Sophia Marchetti. You're 19 years old. You arrived in New York 2 years ago on a ship from Naples alongside 43 other people from a village in Calabria, the toe of the boot of Italy, which is the most beautiful and the most exhausted place you've ever seen, and which you carry with you every day the way you carry the photograph of your mother tucked inside your corset, pressed against your ribs. You arrived with a bundle of clothes, an address written on a piece of paper, and a working knowledge of exactly 3 English words. Yes, no, and please. Nobody told you that please doesn't work on landlords. That's the first thing you learn. Your Aunt Rosa and her husband Emilio live on the 4th floor of 97 Orchard Street. You don't know it yet, but this building becomes famous eventually. A museum, a century from now. People pay money to stand in the very room where you sleep. You have absolutely no way of knowing that, and you only know what you know tonight. The apartment is 2 rooms, and it contains Rosa and Emilio and their 3 children and you, and also Mr. Kaplan, a boarder from Poland who sleeps on a cot behind a curtain in the kitchen, and pays $3 a month for the privilege, which is money your aunt needs the way lungs need air. The rent is $12. $12. That number governs everything in this apartment. What you eat, how much coal you buy, whether the children get new shoes this winter, or whether they stuff newspaper into the old ones and pray for a mild December. You earn $8 a week at the factory, when there's work, when there's enough orders, when the foreman doesn't send you home at noon because they're overstaffed. $8 a week sounds like something. It sounds like survival. And it is, just barely, when everything goes right. But things don't always go right in 1910. Things go wrong so often and so reliably that you've stopped thinking of it as bad luck and started thinking of it as just the way the world is arranged, the way the gears fit together. This week, the machinery jammed. 1 day of short hours on Monday, half a day on Wednesday because you caught your finger in the machine and the forewoman docked you for the time you spent getting it wrapped. Your right hand is bandaged now, the cloth stiff with dried iodine, your middle finger throbbing with the deep pulsing heat that gets worse when the temperature drops, which it has. All day, all evening, you sit on the edge of the bed in the inner room, the room with no window, the one where you and Rosa's oldest daughter, Carmela, sleep on a mattress stuffed with corn husks, and where the smell of machine oil mixes with the smell of everyone who has ever slept here. The candle on the upturned crate throws just enough light to count by. $4.68. You count it again. $4.68. That is what you have. You've counted it 4 times, spreading the coins out on the blanket, grouping them by denomination, adding them up in your head the way your father taught you on a chalkboard worn grey as smoke. Your share of the rent is $4. That's what Rosa and Emilio asked for when you moved in, negotiated with the quiet desperation of people who need the money more than they want to admit needing it. 4 from you, 3 from Mr. Kaplan, 5 from the family. From Emilio's work on the pushcarts and Rosa's piecework, the bundles of shirt-waists she brings home to finish by hand, sitting at the kitchen table until midnight with her youngest on her lap because there is no one else to watch the child and the work must get done. Except Emilio hasn't been well this week. His chest sounds like something is loose inside it. A wet rattle that fills the apartment at night, that wakes the children, that makes Rosa press her lips together in a way that means she's not going to say what she's thinking, because there is no point saying what everyone already knows. He's worked 4 days instead of 6, maybe $3.50, maybe less. You do the math. You've been doing the math for 3 hours. The math always comes out the same. There is not enough. There has not been enough for 2 weeks. And tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, Mr. Graber will knock on the door. Graber is the agent for the building's owner, Mr. Lefkowitz, who owns 6 buildings in this neighborhood and lives somewhere in Brooklyn, in a house with a yard. You've heard about the yard. You've never seen it. Graber collects and evicts with equal efficiency. A thin man in a coat that's too good for the neighborhood. Eyes that run arithmetic the moment they land on you. He comes at 8 o'clock on Saturdays. He accepts no partial payments. This is the rule, and the rule has been the rule for as long as anyone on this floor has lived here. No partial payments. You blow out the candle to save the wax. The room goes dark so completely it feels like something you could press your hands against. In the outer room, Emilio coughs. In the kitchen, Mr. Kaplan turns on his cot, the thin metal frame creaking. In the hallway, soft footsteps. The Abramowitsch boy from the apartment opposite, coming home late from the restaurant where he works. This building breathes. That's what you've learned in 2 years. It breathes and argues and prays in 4 languages simultaneously, and you lie in the dark and listen to all of it. The Greenbergs' Friday murmur of Hebrew from the floor below, soft as rain on a roof, that fills the whole building with something that is, somehow, close to peaceful. The Sicilian couple on the 3rd floor, the Ferraras, who fight with a cheerful velocity that suggests they both enjoy it. The baby 2 doors down, born in October to a family whose name you still don't know. You can know the sounds of someone's entire life without ever learning their name. Carmela sleeps beside you, one arm flung out, fingers curled like she's holding something in her dream. You can feel the heat coming off her small body. In January, you'll be grateful for that heat. Right now, you're just grateful she's still small enough that there's room for you both. Your finger throbs. The rent is due in 9 hours. You close your eyes and try to think. The thing about being poor in 1910, the specific texture of it, is that it requires constant mental labour, not just the physical labour of 12-hour factory days, though that's real enough. The mental labour of calculation. Every penny spent, every penny owed, every penny potentially coming in, and when and from where. You carry your finances the way some people carry grief, always present, a weight in the chest, a background noise that never quiets. Poor people in 1910 are not poor because they're bad at math. They're often extraordinarily good at it. They have to be. When the margin between eating and not eating is 15 cents, you learn to calculate quickly and correctly. You run the numbers again, automatic, like breathing. Your wages this week, with the short hours and the docked time. $6, maybe 6.25. Minus 40 cents already paid back to Mrs. Ferrero downstairs who lent it last week. Minus bread twice. A half-pound of salt herring. 1 bunch of carrots gone limp but still good for the soup. 1 newspaper for Emilio because you cannot take that from a sick man, and it costs 2 cents, and you are not cruel. $4.68. Here is the specific cruelty of $12 a month in 1910. It doesn't sound like much. It sounds almost laughable from any future vantage. But in 1910, $12 is what a labouring man earns in a week and a half. The rent for this apartment, 2 rooms, 4th floor, no heat except the kitchen stove, no bath, the toilet in the yard, has gone up 6 times in 3 years. The landlords understand the city is filling up. The steamship lines from Naples and Palermo and Warsaw run full every week, and there are always more people who need a room than there are rooms to need. Supply and demand. Even the people it's destroying understand it. You knew when you came to New York that it would be hard. Your uncle in Calabria, who'd been to Chicago and come back, told you it would be hard. Your mother cried when you left, not to stop you. There was nothing left for you in Calabria, the land exhausted, the taxes killing the farmers, no work and no future and nothing to stay for. But because she understood what you were walking into, even if she couldn't say it in words, hard is one thing. This specific arithmetic that never quite resolves is something else. You must have slept eventually, because when you open your eyes, the room is grey instead of black, which means morning has arrived whether you are ready for it or not. For a moment, half a second, maybe less, you don't remember. Then the smell hits you. Coal smoke first from the kitchen stove which Emilio must have already lit, the warmth of it creeping under the door, then the building itself, the deep background smell you've stopped noticing on most days, but which hits fresh in the mornings. 100 years of cooking and bodies and damp walls and the particular staleness of rooms where the windows don't open properly. The air shaft outside the inner room, a 3-foot slot between buildings theoretically designed for ventilation, and which actually functions as a repository for the collective smell of every floor above and below. This morning it carries fish. Someone upstairs is cooking fish at 6 in the morning, and in a building with air shafts designed by a man who evidently never lived in one, that fish is now everyone's fish. It mingles with the coal smoke and the chamber pot, and the slight sourness of the milk Rosa still added to the children's porridge yesterday, because you cannot throw food away, not even slightly sour milk, not when there are children. Carmela is still asleep. You slide off the mattress, feet hitting the cold floor. The floor is rough with the grit that accumulates no matter how many times Rosa sweeps. Your finger. You look at it in the grey light. The bandage is unravelled overnight, the cloth twisted around your middle finger and the one beside it. The finger is swollen, the skin around the bandage edge a yellowish purple that is not a good colour for skin to be. You re-wrap it, using your teeth to hold one end. working one-handed in the near dark, using the minor bright pain as a way of not thinking about the rent. The rent is due in 2 hours. In the kitchen, which is also the living room, also Mr. Kaplan's bedroom, separated from the table by a curtain that provides the illusion of privacy without the reality. Rosa is already at the stove. Small woman, 42 years old, who looks closer to 55, with hands roughened by work and water until they've taken on the texture of worn shoe leather. She has her back to you, heating water in the big pot, and she doesn't turn when you come in, but she knows you're there. "Coffee," she says, not a question. "Please." She doesn't ask if you slept. You don't ask about her night. You both know the answer. Mr. Kaplan is behind the curtain. You can hear him. The soft thud of a boot, the metallic click of a suspender buckle. He works at a pressing iron on Broome Street, 12 hours a day in a room where the summer temperature reaches close to 130 degrees. He leaves at 6:30, comes back at 8 in the evening, is unfailingly polite to Rosa, and speaks to you only in Yiddish, which you don't speak, but which has the same rhythms as Italian in certain ways, and you've developed a workable understanding between you. He pays $3 a month. He paid 3 days ago, exact, and on time as always. Behind the curtain, more sounds of a man dressing in a very small space. Rosa sets out the coffee. You sit at the kitchen table and wrap both hands around the cup and let the heat do what it does, which is worth the pain in the injured finger, because the warmth is more important than the pain. Rosa sits across from you. She looks at the table between the cups instead of at you, because sometimes not looking is the only way to say the thing that needs to be said. "I have $3 and some," she says. "I have $4.68. She nods at the table. "Emilio has—" She stops, lips pressing together. "He has $1 and change." You do the addition before she finishes. "So we have $9 and something. We are $3 short." Rosa says it quietly, flatly. The way she says everything terrible. Quietly and flatly, as if the tone can contain it. "I know." The curtain moves. Mr. Kaplan comes out, coat on, hat in hand, nods at you both. He takes the piece of bread Rosa has set out, eats it standing up while reading his section of the Jewish Daily Forward. He finishes, folds the paper, picks up his lunch pail. "Gut Morgen," he says, and the door closes behind him, $3 short, with Graeber arriving at 8 o'clock. Rosa gets up and begins portioning porridge for the children. Her movements are precise and practiced, the economy of a woman who has made too little stretch too far for too long. There is a specific kind of competence in watching her. She wastes nothing, not a gesture, not a word, not a drop. She is the most capable person you know, and she is $3 short of keeping her family in their home. That competence doesn't matter at all against the arithmetic. The children come out. Carmela, 9, hair tangled but already helping without being asked, lifting the smallest one to the bench. Giorgio, 7, impossible to dress before eating, with a look on his face this morning that means he knows something is wrong. And Maria, 2.5, who doesn't know anything, is wrong except that her mother's face is different, who reaches up and touches Rosa's cheek with one small hand while Rosa is serving the porridge, and Rosa catches that hand and holds it for just a second, eyes closed, and then lets it go and goes back to the porridge. Nobody mentions the rent. You have 1 hour before Graeber arrives, 1 hour to find $3. In 1910, in this neighbourhood, there are ways of finding money quickly. None of them are good. All of them cost something, whether that something is money itself or pride or the goodwill of someone you'll need again next month. You know the options. You've been turning them over all night. The pawnshop on Hester Street, Mr. Bernstein's with the 3 gold balls over the door. You have a silver brooch that was your mother's, small and not impressive. Worth maybe $2 to Bernstein if he's generous. That gets you closer, but not there. Mrs. Ferrero on the 2nd floor, who already lent you 40 cents last week, and who has 5 children of her own, and a husband with a broken arm who hasn't worked full-time since September. The debt sits between you every time you pass on the stairs. She never mentions it, which is worse than if she did. You cannot ask her again. The Italian Benevolent Society on Mulberry Street, they give small emergency loans sometimes. But the office doesn't open on Saturdays until 9, and Graeber comes at 8, and the society requires employment papers and a written landlord's name, and sometimes they ask you to sit in a chair while a man who is also Italian but seems to be from a different country entirely looks at you over a desk and writes things down. You know what that chair costs, and you don't have 30 minutes before Graeber arrives. The last option, the one you've been not quite thinking about because it makes your stomach clench when you bring it close. Concetta Silvestri. 3 doors down on the same floor, 60 years old. A face like something that has survived every weather system it has ever encountered and is not particularly worried about the next one. She runs a kind of exchange. Not official, nothing is official on this block. Buying things and selling things and lending money at interest rates that everyone understands are unreasonable and nobody mentions. Because the alternative to Concetta's rate is what Sophia is looking at right now. You've borrowed from her once before. You paid it back in 3 weeks. She remembered. The thing about owing money to Concetta Silvestri is that she lives 3 doors from you. You will pass her door every day for as long as you live in this building. Every time you will feel the weight of whatever you owe. But her door is there, and Graeber arrives in 90 minutes. Hester Street is already busy when you get downstairs at 6:30, which is typical for Hester Street, which is typically the most awake street in the most awake neighbourhood on the most awake island on Earth. The pushcart vendors are setting up. Their wooden carts materializing from the grey morning, loaded with produce and fish and dry goods and second-hand clothing. The vendors are mostly men, mostly Jewish, mostly from the same shtetls in Poland and Russia and Lithuania, and they set up with practiced speed and call to each other in Yiddish across the width of the street, and the noise of them, even at this hour, even in November, even in a cold that has settled in like a lodger who's stopped paying, is extraordinary. Your feet are wet by the time you reach the corner. The puddles on the cobblestones have a thin skin of ice just thick enough to crack under your shoe and admit cold water through the gap in your sole. You've been meaning to have the boots resoled since September. You've not had the 4 cents to spare. You pull your shawl tighter. You keep moving. The November cold is efficient rather than dramatic. It doesn't show off. It just turns the temperature of everything down to where it intends it to be, and then it stays. Your breath makes small clouds. The fish smell from the market mixes with the coal smoke from 100 chimneys, and the warm animal smell of the first delivery horses appearing, heavy-footed at the end of the block. You pass a pushcart stacked with apples, round, red, in careful pyramids. The vendor is maybe 17, red-eared, coat too thin for the weather, blowing on his own fingers, watching you with eyes that are simultaneously alert for business and vacant with early morning exhaustion. You don't buy an apple, but you look at them, and they look back at you with the implacable beauty of things you cannot have. You keep walking. Concetta Silvestri's ground floor place is not exactly a shop. It is the front room of her apartment, furniture pushed back to make room for a table, and behind the table Concetta herself, drinking coffee so black it looks like motor oil when you push open her door without knocking, because knocking at Concetta's would be a kind of rudeness, and she looks at you and she already knows. "Rent," she says. $3, you say, until next Friday. She sets down the cup, looks at you the way a jeweller looks at a piece he's been offered, turning it in the light. $3 until Friday, plus 50 cents. 35 cents. 45. 40. Another moment. Then she opens the tin box on the table. 40 cents in interest on $3 for 1 week. A rate your father would have called criminal. Your father, who spent his whole life in Calabria trying to borrow money from anyone who would lend it to survive the years when the harvest failed, he would have understood Concetta Silvestri completely, and hated her completely, and needed her completely. You take the $3. "Friday," Concetta says without looking up. "Friday," you say. Back upstairs. 7:15. The apartment smells of porridge and coal smoke and the specific tension that has been building since yesterday, which has no smell of its own, but which you feel in the way Emilio sits at the table not eating his porridge, just pushing it around with his spoon. In the way Rosa is cleaning the stove with too much attention, scrubbing at a spot that's already clean, using the work the way people use work when there's nothing else to do with their hands. You put the money on the table. Rosa looks at it. Then she looks at you. She knows where it came from. She knows what it cost. She says nothing, picks up the money, adds it to the coins and bills already sorted at the corner of the table, counts it all. $12, she says. $12, you say. Emilio looks up from his porridge. His face, thinner than it was in August, the shadows under his eyes deeper than last week, his moustache untrimmed in a way that would normally trouble him because Emilio has always been careful about appearances, has always believed you could be poor and still be presentable. That dignity didn't require money. His face does something complicated. Relief and shame, and something you recognize because you felt it yourself. This specific expression of a person who has needed help and received it, and doesn't know how to be grateful in a way that doesn't cost him something essential. "Good," he says. Just that one word. Giorgio is watching from across the table, eating his porridge now, spoon moving in small, careful circles. 7 years old with eyes that pick up more than they should. You catch his gaze and make your face say, "Everything is fine." He makes his face say, "Okay, I believe you. Both of you are lying. Both of you know it. It is the most adult exchange you've ever had with the 7-year-old. The church on the corner rings the quarter hour. 7:45. Graeber in 15 minutes. He arrives at 8 o'clock exactly. You've never seen a man who kept such precise time, not a minute early, not a minute late. As though the schedule itself is a form of power, a demonstration of who controls what. He knocks twice, quick and businesslike. Rosa opens the door. Graeber's in his good coat, heavy wool that holds its shape. Not like the coats most people on this floor wear. His hat is clean, his moustache trimmed. He carries a small ledger and a pen he uncaps before he steps fully inside, and he does not wait to be invited, because he has never waited to be invited, because this is not that kind of visit. He is not cruel exactly. You've worked this out over 2 years. He doesn't take pleasure in any of it. His face moving over the apartment, the children at the table, Emilio by the stove, the laundry on the line between 2 nails in the wall. His face is simply doing a calculation. He is the instrument of an arithmetic that doesn't care about the people on either side of it. Mrs. Marchetti, he says, not Signora, not with any acknowledgement that she's a person with a language and a country, and a name that belongs to a specific place. Just Mrs. Marchetti, flattened by the new country into a thing that fits in his ledger. Rosa hands over the money without a word. $12 already counted. Graeber counts it again, his thumb moving through the bills with the practiced speed of someone who counts money for a living. Makes a note, turns to leave, then stops. He turns back. Looks at the wall by the door, more carefully than he usually does. A crack in the plaster, dark against the white, running from just above the baseboard to about 3 feet up, widening at the bottom where moisture has been coming in since September. Rosa has put a piece of oilcloth against the baseboard to keep the floor dry. The crack, Rosa says before he can speak. I reported it in September. 2 times I reported it. Graeber looks at the crack, at Rosa, at his ledger, as if consulting it on the matter. I'll look into it, he says. The cold comes through there. My youngest. I'll look into it. Same tone as before. Neither more nor less. The crack will be looked into. This sentence has no relationship to any actual looking. He leaves. Rosa stands with her hand on the doorknob for a moment, not turning around. Then she breathes and turns and begins clearing the table. That is that. The rent is paid. The next 30 days of survival have begun. By 9 o'clock, you're at the factory. No rest day today. Saturday is a full work day in 1910, unless you observe the Sabbath, in which case you might get Saturday off and lose your job to someone who doesn't. The machines don't rest. The building is on Washington Place. A 10-minute walk through streets busy even on Saturday morning, past the push carts and the shop windows and the children selling newspapers on corners and the steam rising from sidewalk grates. That mysterious warmth. New York exhales all winter. A 10-minute walk on a good day. Today your left boot is worse than the right, the water having found a seam in the leather that wasn't there in October, and each step brings a cold shock that has stopped surprising you but hasn't stopped being uncomfortable. The factory is on the 8th floor. You take the stairs. The elevator exists, but it's for fabric deliveries and for Mr. Gottlieb, who comes and goes with the invisible ease of someone with enough money to avoid most physical unpleasantness. Everyone else takes the stairs. 8 flights on a staircase slightly too narrow, the banister worn smooth from 10,000 hands, the walls painted an institutional green that was probably optimistic when first applied, and is now just the colour of somewhere you'd rather not be. Your legs know these stairs. Your body has mapped every landing, every place where the wood is soft underfoot, every place where the railing wobbles. Around you, other women are climbing, the morning shift assembling floor by floor like sediment settling into layers. And you know their faces, but not always their names, because there are 60 women on your floor alone, and the turnover is high enough that you've stopped memorizing the new ones until they've been there a month. The floor opens before you. Sewing machines. 60 of them, in rows, close enough that when you sit down you feel the heat from the machine on your left and the one on your right. The sound of them. A high, sustained roar you've learned to hear through rather than hear, the way you stop hearing a waterfall if you live beside one. But it hits you fresh each morning. The physical impact of 60 Singer machines running simultaneously. The vibration in your feet through the floor, in your hands on the table, in your back teeth when you're tired enough. The room smells of machine oil and sizing and the faint chemical bite of the dyes, and underneath all of it the smell of the women themselves. 60 women who haven't had enough hot water to wash as often as they'd like, who wear wool because wool is warm and warm is not optional. And wool in a heated room full of running machines has a particular smell that is deeply human, and which you've stopped noticing on ordinary days, but which, like the smell of the tenement, returns to you fresh in the small hours when you have no defences. Your machine is in the 3rd row, 7th from the left. You sit down. The woman to your left is Paulina, Polish. Dark circles under her eyes suggesting her night was not unlike yours. To your right, Esther, 16, from Russia, 6 months in the country, already faster on the machine than most women who've been here 3 years. Esther looks at your bandaged finger with an expression that is simultaneously sympathetic and calculating. She's wondering how your production will be affected, because your production affects hers, because the floor has quotas, and when one woman falls short, it is felt by all the others. You don't take it personally. You'd be thinking the same thing. The forewoman, Mrs. Stein, is down the row before you finish threading the machine. Compact woman in her 40s who wants 90 shirt-waist bodies from each woman by end of day, and if that means working through the lunch break, then you work through the lunch break. Finger, she says, looking at the bandage, it's fine. Can you sew? Yes. She nods and moves on. Not unkind, just the next instrument of the arithmetic. You thread the machine. Your right hand protests as you pull the thread through the needle guide, as you position the first body of fabric, as your foot hits the treadle. The machine engages with a shudder you feel in your thigh. The needle starts. The shirtwaist body goes through and comes out the other side with the seam closed. You pull it off, add it to the pile on your left, pick up the next one. 90 bodies by the end of the day. The machines run. Here is what piecework does to a body over time. This is the thing they don't put in the newspapers, though some of the reformers have been trying to put it there for years. Florence Kelly, with her careful data and her clear-eyed anger, going to state legislatures, and the state legislatures listening politely, and then doing whatever the factory owners want, because the factory owners have money and Florence Kelly has only facts. The piecework system pays you by the piece. Each completed shirtwaist body earns you a set amount. Simple, clean, fair, at least in theory. Except the rate per piece is set by the owner, and the rate is set by what it costs the owner, not by what it costs you to live. And when the orders are high and the workers are fast and the piecework wages start looking generous to the man who signs the checks, the rate gets cut per piece to keep weekly wages at the level management has decided is appropriate. So you work faster, because faster means more pieces, more money, and then the rate gets cut again. There is no floor, there is no rate that cannot be cut. The workers know this. The owners know this. The interaction between these two facts is what every labour organiser in this city has been trying to articulate for 20 years. 2 years ago, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union held a meeting on Clinton Street. You went, not because you were a union woman yet, but because Paulina was going, and you followed her out of curiosity and some vague solidarity you didn't yet have words for. There were 1,000 women in a hall designed for 500, and a young woman named Clara Lemlich stood up near the front and said something in Yiddish that you didn't understand, and then someone translated it, and the hall went up like a struck match. Clara Lemlich said, "I have listened to all the speakers. I have no further patience for talk. I move that we go out on a general strike." The general strike lasted 3 months. They called it the uprising of the 20,000. You walked off the floor on the second day, down 8 flights of stairs in a group, out onto Washington Place in the November cold. It was November then too, the timing is not lost on you. Standing on the picket line with a sign that said, "Justice," and shivering. The bosses hired men to break the lines. Thick-necked men who showed up in mornings and pushed the women off the sidewalk and tore up their signs. The police helped sometimes, arresting the strikers rather than the men assaulting them. Judges fined women $20 each, $20, 2 weeks' wages, which some of them didn't have, for disturbing the peace, though the peace they disturbed was the peace of the factory running without interruption, which is not exactly the same peace. You were arrested on the 4th day, 32 hours in the Jefferson Market jail, cold brick walls and a cell with 8 women and a bucket serving as the toilet, and a guard who called you names in English you didn't fully understand, but whose meaning you understood completely. 32 hours. Then a lawyer from a committee came and paid your fine, and you walked out into the morning and went back to the picket line. The strike ended in February. Mixed results. Some factories signed agreements. Mr. Gottlieb's factory signed one that promised shorter hours and marginally better wages and a small say in working conditions, and then spent the next 3 months finding ways around it, because the agreement was paper and the factory was a fact, and facts outlast paper. You're still here. Paulina's still here. Esther, who came after the strike, doesn't carry it in her body the way you do. She knows about it the way you know about the Revolutionary War, as something that happened. Not as something that happened to you personally in a jail cell. The machines run. Your finger hurts. You sew 92 shirtwaist bodies before the bell rings at 4:30. Outside, the air is cold and almost clean. Almost. It's still November air in Manhattan, still thick with coal smoke and the collective exhalation of 500,000 people. But after 8 hours inside with the machines and the oil smell and the wool, even this feels like breathing. You take the long way home. Not because you want to be out in the cold, you don't. Your back aches with the specific deep ache of someone who's been trying to use only one hand for most of a 10-hour shift. But because the long way takes you past Orchard Street, and on Orchard Street on Saturday afternoons there is sometimes an informal market where people sell things from their windowsills and stoops, things you don't have money for. But looking is free. A woman on the 2nd floor of number 107 has a quilt draped over her windowsill, airing it out, not selling it. Blues and yellows and a deep faded red, made from dress scraps probably, from the remnants of a family's clothing over years. The kind of thing that takes a year to make and carries the whole history of who wore what. You stop and look at it. Just a moment. Your mother had a quilt like that. Different colours, more greens, the green of the hills above your village, but the same principle. Beautiful precisely because it was made from remnants. The woman notices you looking. She doesn't pull the quilt in. She just looks back, and there's a moment of something that isn't communication exactly, but is the thing that happens between people who recognize each other's situation without having to explain it. You keep walking. The staircase. Rosa at the table with Carmela, helping her with the school primer. English letters, the shapes foreign and slightly suspicious looking. Rosa's brow furrowed, her lips moving, forming sounds that don't belong to Italian. The potatoes, Rosa says, meaning she needs them for supper. You get the potatoes. 4 of them, small, beginning to go soft. You take them to the basin and clean them with a cloth and begin to cut. The knife is sharp. Emilio keeps the knives sharp, one of his few firm principles. Sharp because a dull knife is more dangerous. And the potatoes divide cleanly, white flesh showing. You cut them the same size so they'll cook evenly and put them in the pot with water and a pinch of salt. Simple work. Your hands know how to do it without being asked. In the inner room, Emilio coughs again. Supper is potatoes and the heel of the bread and some salt herring stronger than yesterday but still edible. Everyone eats. The children have the biggest portions because they're growing, and Rosa makes it so without making a ceremony of it, distributing the food with a casual deliberateness that achieves its goals quietly. Mr. Kaplan comes in from work, eats in silence, retreats behind his curtain. Emilio eats slowly, carefully, as if eating requires concentration. "The doctor," you say to Rosa quietly in Italian, while the children argue about something at the other end of the table. "Thursday," she says, meaning the dispensary on Rivington Street where you can be seen for free if you wait long enough, which costs hours what it saves in dollars. What did he say? He said rest. She says it with a specific flatness. Rest. Rest. Better food. No cold air. You look at Emilio, who is listening without appearing to listen. No cold air, you say. Rosa picks up her fork. The conversation is over. No cold air. In a building where the crack in the wall lets in November. In an apartment where the only heat is the kitchen stove that you can't afford to run all night because coal costs. Rest and better food, and no cold air. The irony is so complete it doesn't feel like irony anymore. It just feels like the world describing itself accurately. After supper you sit by the window in the outer room. It faces east toward the water you can't see. Too many buildings between you and the East River. Too many rooftops and water tower and lines of laundry. But you know the water is there. Can sometimes smell it when the wind comes right. Cold and salt and something marine that cuts through the usual layers. 2 years ago, coming in on the ship from Naples, the harbour opening out in the morning haze, the city appearing through it, like something conjured rather than built, you stood at the rail and thought, this is it. This is the place. Whatever happens here will be the most real thing that's ever happened to me. It has been real. You'll give it that. Extremely, persistently, comprehensively real. You take out the photograph. Your mother standing in front of the house in Calabria, squinting slightly into the sun. The photograph is small and bent at one corner from living against your ribs, and you've memorized it. But you look at it again anyway. In Calabria, poverty was different, not better. You refuse to make that mistake, to idealize what you left just because what you found when you arrived is hard. Your father borrowed from the landowner and could never quite pay it back, and the interest accumulated, and there were years when the harvest failed, and years when the taxes came before the harvest was in, and the specific misery of it was a misery with a face, a name, a history. Everyone in the village was inside the same story, which didn't make it better but made it legible. Here, in New York, the arithmetic is the same, but the faces keep changing. The landlord you never see, only Graeber. The factory owner who sees you only as part of the row of machines, as a production unit. The city itself, so large and complex and indifferent, that understanding any one piece of it feels like an achievement. But you understand your block. You understand Hester Street and Washington Place and the Rivington Street dispensary and the way potato prices go up slightly on Fridays because people are buying for the weekend and the vendors know it. You understand the 4th floor of this building with the thoroughness of necessity. Every sound and smell and draft and creak, that's not nothing. Outside the light is gone. Gas lamps down the block turning on one by one, as the lamplighter works his way from post to post with his pole, the moment when the street changes colour from grey to amber. A few electric lights in shop windows, Electricity is coming slowly, block by block, but mostly gas, and the gas gives everything a slight quality of something preserved in honey, warm and slightly unreal. Carmela comes and leans against you. She smells of the lavender soap Rosa bought 2 months ago as a small extravagance she's been regretting and not regretting alternately ever since. Carmela is at the age where she leans against people without thinking about it, still young enough to need to be held without being self-conscious about it. You let her lean. After a while she falls asleep against your shoulder. You sit there with her weight on you, and the city going dark outside and your injured finger throbbing and 40 cents owed to Conchetta by Friday, and the week ahead of you and Emilio's cough in the next room, and you don't think about any of it particularly. You just sit there and let the weight of this girl against you be sufficient. Just for now. Just for this moment in the amber light, with the street going quiet below. It's enough. It has to be. Sunday is church and laundry, and for Rosa, the benevolent society. Let me be precise about what Sunday means in this neighbourhood in 1910, because Sunday has a specific texture here, different from the other 6 days in ways that are simultaneously religious and practical and social all at once. Officially, Sunday is the day of rest. The Christian families, the Italian and Irish families on this floor, attend morning mass at the Church of the Most Precious Blood on Mulberry Street, a 15-minute walk that involves navigating the remnants of Saturday's market and the new arrivals who've materialised overnight, men with bundles on stoops, women studying addresses on papers. The church smells of incense and candle wax and the collective exhalation of 100 people who spent the previous night working or drinking or praying or all three. Father Anselmo says the Mass in Latin, which nobody understands completely, but which moves through the space with its own logic, independent of comprehension. You kneel and stand and kneel again, your body following the grammar of the Mass automatically while your mind does what minds do in church, which is not quite what the church intends. You think about money, you think about Emilio's cough, you think about the crack in the wall. You think about Clara Lemlich, who is 23 years old and has had her ribs broken twice by strikebreakers in 18 months, which sounds like the biography of someone who lived a long time ago, but happened to someone currently living about 8 blocks from where you're kneeling. The candles burn. Father Anselmo lifts the chalice. You are here, and also somewhere else, in the particular way of people who've learned to be present in their bodies while their minds are elsewhere, calculating. After Mass, Rosa goes to the Benevolent Society office while you take the children to the small triangular park 2 blocks over. Giorgio runs at the iron fence with a violence that is entirely joyful. Carmela reads her schoolbook on a bench with the concentration of someone who has decided reading is the way out and is applying herself accordingly. Maria, 2.5, wants to touch everything. Every leaf, every stone, every pigeon that lands within reach, with a quality of pure sustained fascination, the world not yet sorted into important and unimportant, everything getting the same intensity of attention. You follow her slowly around the park perimeter, hand ready to catch her if she stumbles, and you watch her discover a crack in the pavement where a weed has grown. Small, tenacious, winter pale. She squats down and touches the leaves very carefully with one finger. Leaf, you say. Foglia. She looks up. Folia, she says. Foglia. Foglia. Close enough. You think, she was born in this city. This city is hers in a way it will never be fully yours. She'll grow up speaking English without an accent, without the thing in your voice that places you before you've said 2 words, that makes some people helpful and some people contemptuous, and everyone aware you're not from here. Maria will be from here. That's worth something. Rosa comes back from the society with news that is not quite good and not quite bad, which is the best kind of news the society usually delivers. There is a note from a Miss Whitfield from the charity organisation Society. She will visit the building on Thursday to inspect living conditions and determine what assistance might be provided. A visitor from the charity organisation Society. You know what this means. You've seen it happen to the Ferrero family downstairs. The COS visitor arrives with a notebook and an air of organised benevolence, and she goes through the apartment and makes notes and asks questions about your income and expenditures and habits. And on the basis of this, she determined whether you are deserving poor or undeserving poor. That distinction is one of the foundational ideas of charity in 1910, the theory. Some poverty is not the poor person's fault and therefore deserves help. Other poverty results from moral failure, drink, laziness, improvidence, and doesn't deserve assistance, might even be made worse by it. The visitor has a form. The form asks how much you spend on alcohol, on tobacco, whether the family attends church, whether the children are in school, whether there are entertainment expenses, in a 2-room apartment with a crack in the wall, and a sick man at the kitchen table, and a baby who has never owned a toy that wasn't improvised from something else. Rosa is practical. We clean, she says. Everything clean, children dressed well. You talk about the factory and hours. I talk about Emilio and the doctor. And the crack? Show her the crack. Show her everything. The crack has been there since September. Graeber will look into it. The charity visitor will also look into it. Multiple people will look into this crack. The crack will continue to exist. But you clean. Monday morning, 5:15. Your finger is better. Still tender, but the swelling has come down enough that you can grip fabric without your eyes watering. The stairs in the dark, the cold street, Washington Place. The building appears out of the grey. You pass through the lobby, take the stairs. The 8th floor opens, machines warming up. Some women come early, setting up before the official 6 o'clock start, because the logic here is that you can't start late. But if you start early, those minutes are yours, not theirs. Everyone understands this. Nobody mentions it. You sit down, thread the machine, feel the familiar vibration when the treadle engages, up through the floor, through the chair, through you. You pick up the first shirtwaist body from the pile on your left and begin. In the afternoons, when the body has surrendered to the work and the mind is free, you think about the meeting. There's a union meeting on Tuesday evening. Paulina mentioned it in the 20 minutes of the not really break, mentioned it sideways, not looking directly at you, because looking directly at someone you're inviting to a union meeting is a way of making it easy to identify them later. The meeting is at a hall on Stanton Street. Local 25. They're going to discuss the current rate cut. Gottlieb dropped the piecework rate 3 weeks ago, a half-cent per piece, which sounds like nothing and adds up to about 40 cents a week per worker on the floor. 40 cents a week, $2 a month, $24 a year. For a woman making $4 a week, that's 15% of her annual income. You've been turning over whether to go. The last time cost you 32 hours in jail and a $20 fine the committee paid, which you're still not entirely easy about. The debt of it, the obligation that has no name and therefore no way to discharge. But the rate cut is real, and the crack in the wall is still there, and there are, you've been realizing more clearly, 2 kinds of problems in your life. The ones that are yours, your debt to Conchetta, your injured finger, your inadequate boots, and the ones that belong to everyone, to every woman in your row on the 8th floor, and every family in your building, and every person in this neighbourhood who works for someone else and lives in someone else's building. Systemic problems require collective solutions. That's what Clara Lemlich was saying in the hall on Clinton Street, even if she didn't say it in those words. You go. You tell Rosa you're going to visit Paulina. This is not entirely a lie because you are going with Paulina. Rosa's face does the thing it does when it knows more than it's saying, which is the face of a woman who has been in this country long enough to know what visiting Paulina on a Tuesday evening probably means. She says, "Be back by 10. That's all. You walk with Paulina through streets darker than daytime but by no means empty. The tenement neighbourhood doesn't empty out, not even late, because there isn't room inside for everyone, and because the children who don't have school tomorrow are still out, running the blocks in packs the way children run when they've had all day inside and the street is the only space available. The hall on Stanton Street is one of the standard venues, a social hall rented by the hour, which on Friday nights holds weddings and on Tuesday evenings holds labour meetings, the same chairs in the same configuration, the gas lights at the same level. You arrive at 8 and the hall is already 3/4 full. Mostly women, but some men from the pressing and cutting rooms, a few organisers who've come to support rather than to control. The room is warm, too warm, the way rooms with too many bodies get warm, and smells of the factory women, which you know from the 8th floor. Wool and machine oil and the working week, human and close and absolutely real. A man named Salvatore Ninfo from the union office is speaking. He speaks Italian with a Sicilian accent, translating his own sentences into Yiddish for the women who don't follow Italian, and the room follows this dual language flow with a concentration that shows how much practice they've had at understanding speeches in multiple languages simultaneously. He's talking about the rate cut. He doesn't raise his voice. The math doesn't need a raised voice. 1/2 cent per piece, 40 cents a week, $2 a month. Around you, women nod. Not the emphatic nod of agreement, the smaller one, the chin dropping and lifting once, the nod of recognition. The nod that says, "Yes, I knew it was this," and hearing it said aloud confirms the thing I already knew in my body. Your finger aches in the warm room. You unwrap the bandage slightly to let the air at it. The woman next to you glances at your hand. Older, maybe 45, calm and watchful. She's not from your floor, might work somewhere else entirely. She looks at your finger with the quick assessment of someone who's seen many work injuries and says nothing, which is exactly right. A young woman near the front is speaking now in Yiddish, translated in real time into Italian, the two voices overlapping so that you hear the thought in two languages almost simultaneously, slightly out of sync. She's talking about the door on the 9th floor, the one management keeps locked during working hours to prevent unauthorised breaks. A key the foreman holds. If you need to leave the floor, you need to ask the foreman, and the foreman is busy and asking takes time, and the time is yours, not theirs. You've thought about it. The way you think about the crack in the wall, not with particular alarm because it's there every day and every day nothing has happened, and the human capacity to normalise things is extraordinary, but with a low-level awareness, a thing in the background. The woman is talking about what happens if there's a fire, not predicting, posing it as a hypothetical. In the dry language of organising, what are the safety protocols? What are the exits? What is the procedure in the event of emergency evacuation? She asks, if it were necessary to evacuate quickly, is the current configuration adequate? Gottlieb's building has 2 stairwells and 1 elevator. The stairwell on the Washington Place side, locked door. The stairwell on Green Street, open but narrow, descending 9 floors. The elevator, not designed for mass evacuation. The fire escapes, old, narrow, attached to the exterior wall. She's asking, is this adequate? You look around the room at the faces of women from the various floors, and you see in their faces a thing that is hard to name. Not exactly fear, an awareness that has just come into focus, a thing that was always present but not examined. The locked door is there every day. The door is just the door, and also the door is locked. At 9:30, you and Paulina step out into Stanton Street. You walk a block without talking. The cold has deepened while you were inside, and your breath makes clouds, and the cobblestones are slick with a thin rime of ice. The door, Paulina says. I know. They won't change it. I know. You've talked about this before, in the sideways way you talk at the factory, in the 20 minutes of the not really break. Machines stopped, women eating bread and not looking at each other directly. Are you going to sign the petition? Paulina asks. Yes. Are you? Yes. You walk the rest of the way in silence. At your corner you separate, and she goes one way and you go the other, and the building is quiet when you get back, 10 o'clock exactly. Rosa's lamp out under the door. You climb to the 4th floor, ease the door open. The apartment is dark and breathing. The specific sound of other people sleeping, the rhythm of it, the small sounds. Through the thin wall beyond the inner room, Emilio is breathing. Not coughing, just breathing. You lie down on the cornhusk mattress in your clothes. The cold comes through the crack in the wall in a thin stream, moving across your face in the dark. You stare at the ceiling. Wednesday. The machines. Thursday. Miss Whitfield. She arrives at 2 o'clock, which is when she said she would, which is a kind of courtesy you register. Younger than expected. Maybe 30, with the look of a woman who has gone to college and absorbed the reform ideas of her time, which include the poor deserve dignity, living conditions in tenements are a public health crisis, and the poor themselves are the best advocates for their own interests if only given the proper support structures. Her name is Miss Whitfield. She has a brown-covered notebook and a pen in a holder on her lapel, and she wears a practical coat that costs more than 2 weeks of your wages, but which she bought, you'd guess. Specifically because it's not fashionable, a concession to the neighbourhood. She shakes your hand, she shakes Rosa's hand. Thank you for having me, she says in careful Italian. The pronunciation slightly off, but the attempt genuine. You answer in English because your English is better now, much better than 3 years ago, the language coming into focus the way a photograph develops in chemicals, slowly and then all at once. She goes through the apartment, looks at everything. The crack in the wall first, which you walk her to and let her see. The water stain on the floorboards, the oilcloth against the baseboard. She makes a note. The stove. The window in the outer room. The lack of a window in the inner room. 2 rooms for 7 people plus a boarder. The shared toilet in the yard, 4 flights down, shared with 8 other families. She makes notes for all of it. She asks about income. You give her the correct numbers, not inflated in hopes of getting more help, not deflated in hopes of appearing more desperate. Just the numbers. $8 a week when there's full work. $4.68 left after this week's shortfall. The $3 loan and the 40 cents interest due Friday. She writes this down. The loan, she says, from a neighbour. A neighbour who does this for people in the building. Her face does something specific that suggests a particular opinion about private money lending in tenements, which she keeps to herself. She asks about Emilio. Rosa describes the cough, the missed days, the dispensary visit. Miss Whitfield writes down the address of the Henry Street settlement, a visiting nurse service that can come to the apartment. At no cost, she says. She'll make a referral. The nurse will come within the week. This is actually useful. You hadn't known about the visiting nurse service. You know about it now. The crack in the wall, she says, looking at her notes. You've reported this to the landlord. 2 times, September and November. And the response? He will look into it. Miss Whitfield writes something in the notebook. From where you stand, it looks like it might be the landlord's name and address. The something has a quality about it. I'll follow up with the building's owner, she says. Graber, you say. The agent's name is Graber. Thank you. She finishes. She gives you a paper with the Henry Street settlement address and a name. Lillian Wald, the director, worth knowing, she says. She gives you a list of food pantries in the neighbourhood, which you already have but which you take anyway because taking it costs nothing and you don't want her to feel her effort was wasted. She shakes both your hands. She goes to the door, then she stops, turns back, looks at the room, looks at you and Rosa, with an expression trying to be professional and not quite succeeding. I want to say something, she says. Not on the form. You wait. You are doing everything right, she says. I want you to know that. Everything I can see, the children, the apartment, the way you're managing, you're doing it right. The system is not doing right by you. That's different. Rosa looks at her, doesn't say anything for a moment. Then, thank you, in Italian. Then in English. Thank you. Miss Whitfield leaves. Rosa stands at the door. This time, when she turns, her eyes are slightly wet. She doesn't acknowledge it. She goes to the stove. The week passes. Friday. The machines. Paulina pulls you aside during the not really break and shows you the petition. Already half signed, the paper dense with names in 3 languages. And you sign it and pass it back. And she folds it into her apron pocket and goes back to her machine. That evening you pay Conchetta the $3.40. She counts it without comment and makes a mark in her ledger. $3 returned. 40 cents interest. A week's interest on 3 days of survival. The mathematics of living at the edge. Saturday. Graber arrives at 8 o'clock exactly. You have the $12. This time, when he turns to leave, you say it. The crack in the wall. A visitor from the Charity Organisation Society came on Thursday. She's following up with the building's owner about the repair. Graber looks at you. He looks at you for a moment in a way that is different from the usual arithmetic assessment. Something uncertain at the edge of it. I'll look into it, he says. But this time, for the first time, there is a hesitation at the start of those words that wasn't there in September, wasn't there in November. A landlord in 1910 has tremendous power over the families in his buildings. He can raise the rent. He can evict. He can look into things indefinitely. He can do all of this because the law, such as it is not reliably on your side, and because there is always another family arriving from Naples or Warsaw who needs a room. But he has a name in Miss Whitfield's notebook now, and Miss Whitfield has the building owner's name, and the COS has relationships with city building inspectors, and inspectors, if sufficiently pressured by organised middle-class reformers, can make certain things unpleasant for certain landlords. None of this changes the fundamental arrangement. None of this fixes the crack today, but the crack has been written down, and the landlord's name has been written down next to it, by someone whose class position means her complaint carries more weight than yours. It's not justice, but it's something. It's the machinery turning slightly differently in one small gear. Graeber leaves. Rosa looks at you across the kitchen table. Sunday, she says, meaning there is something to discuss that isn't for now, not in front of the children, not in front of the weight of the week. Sunday, you agree. And now, Sunday. Sunday means Mass in the morning, the park with the children, and Sunday means the roof. The roof of 97 Orchard Street is not somewhere people go in November usually. It's just the top of the building. Tar paper and the water tower and a low parapet wall, and views of every other rooftop stretching away in every direction. An endless landscape of brick and water towers and laundry lines, and the occasional pigeon coop built by someone whose lease apparently permits it. But on a morning when the sky is clear, when the cold has scraped the air clean for once, when the smoke is blowing north instead of settling into the canyon of the streets, on a morning like this one, you take the stairs to the 5th floor, and then the narrow final stair, shoulder open the roof access door against the wind, and step out. The city. The city spreads in every direction, with a clarity that the streets don't allow, streets where the buildings press close, and the sky is a narrow strip, and everything is immediate and vertical and contained. Up here, it opens. To the north, the older city, and somewhere further the park that rich people use, and buildings going up taller than anything you've ever seen. Steel frames rising into the winter sky on the far edges of the island where you've never been, and which feels as foreign as anything you left behind. To the East River. You can see it from here, silver in the morning light, the bridges crossing it, the Brooklyn Bridge most prominent, towers rising above everything, cables catching the light like the rigging of a very large ship, and the boats on the river, even on Sunday, ferries and freighters and smaller vessels, because the river doesn't observe the Sabbath and doesn't observe Sunday and doesn't rest at all. It just runs. To the west, more of the city, more rooftops going grid by grid toward the Hudson, which you can't see but which you know is there, where the ships from Naples came in, where the ships from everywhere come in, delivering the world to this island. To the south, the lower end of the island, the financial district where the men who own things do the work of owning things, buildings dense and several floors taller than anything up here. And beyond that, the harbour, the Atlantic, which you crossed. This city is so large, and also it is made of blocks, each one a different world. The Jewish blocks and the Italian blocks and the Irish and German and Chinese and Syrian blocks, each with its own language and its own smells and its own rhythms and its own ways of surviving, and all of them existing within the same $12 rent and the same machines and the same arithmetic. And over all of it, the owners. Not just Mr. Lefkowitz with his 6 tenements, but the whole category he represents. The people who own the buildings and the factories and the machines and the fabric and the thread and the shirt you make from the thread, and which you can then buy back at the store at a price calibrated to be just barely within reach, so that the transaction can happen over and over indefinitely. You stand at the parapet wall with your hands on the rough brick, cold coming through your palms, and you look at it all. You're so small in this. And also, this whole thing, this city, this empire, this extraordinary, brutal, beautiful machine runs on the labour of people like you, on the hands of the women on the 8th floor, on the backs of the men who unload the ships on the East River piers, on the feet of the children who run messages all day for pennies, because they're small enough to move through crowded streets faster than anyone else. On every hand and back and foot the city requires and doesn't count. Your hands made the shirt the woman in the uptown department store will buy this week. Your hands and Paulina's and Esther's and the 57 other women on the 8th floor of the building on Washington Place. Clara Lemlich was right. The hands are the factory, and the hands are also cold. The hands also owe 40 cents to the neighbour. The hands also live in an apartment with a crack in the wall where November comes in. Both of these things are equally and simultaneously true. You stand on the roof long enough that the cold has worked through your coat and is sitting in your shoulders with a dull and patient weight. Long enough that the sun has moved to about due south, as high as it gets in November. You can hear the city from here. Not the specific sounds of your street, but the aggregate, the hum and clatter of 1,000,000 lives being lived simultaneously. Horses and machines and voices in 100 languages and the bells of 12 churches and the boat whistles on the river, and underneath all of it, something that is almost vibration more than sound, the thing the city makes when it is simply being itself. Enormous and alive and entirely indifferent to any one part of it. And also, not entirely indifferent. The women in the Union Hall are part of it. Miss Whitfield with her notebook is part of it. The visiting nurse from Henry Street is part of it. The children growing up to speak English without accents, they are part of it. The city is many things at once, and all of them are true. You turn from the parapet, you go back downstairs, Sunday dinner, potatoes and the dried sausage Rosa has been rationing since Wednesday. Better than last week. Emilio worked 3 full days. The medicine from the visiting nurse seems to be helping, the cough quieter. Giorgio has learned 12 new English words from the school primaire and insists on using all 12 during dinner, some correctly, some not. And Carmela corrects the incorrect ones with the gentle authority of a child who has been learning longer and takes this responsibility seriously. Maria eats with her hands and considers a piece of sausage with the same intensity she gave the weed in the park. Mr. Kaplan comes out from behind his curtain, eats quickly, goes back. Rosa, across the table from you, looks at you for a moment. "What did you see up there?" she asks. You look back at her. "Everything, you say." She nods, like she knew that was the answer. The meal goes on. Evening. The children are in bed. Emilio has taken his medicine and is asleep. Mr. Kaplan's light is out. You sit at the kitchen table with Rosa and the last of the chicory. Really chicory now, no real coffee remaining but hot. And you talk the way women talk after children are asleep. More direct, with less held back. "The nurse," Rosa says, "she said the medicine will help. 3 weeks, maybe 4, if he doesn't go back out in the cold." 3 weeks, you say, meaning 3 weeks of $3 weeks instead of $4 weeks. Rosa nods. She already knows the math. The society might help a little. She pushes a folded paper across the table. A note from the COS, Miss Whitfield's careful handwriting, saying that on the basis of her visit, the society is prepared to provide a food allocation for 2 weeks to be collected at the Rivington Street office on Tuesdays. That helps, you say. Yes. You sit with the chicory, both looking at the table between you. "The union meeting," Rosa says. You look up. "I know you went," she says. Not accusatory, just stating. "Yes." The petition. 43 names, Monday morning. She turns her cup in her hands. She doesn't say, "Be careful." You've both had the conversation about being careful so many times that another repetition would be redundant. What she says is, the locked door, the one they talk about. You didn't know she knew about the locked door. You didn't tell her. The women from the 9th floor, she says. 2 of them live in this building. I hear them. Of course she does. Rosa hears everything. She has always heard everything, in every building she has ever lived in, because that is what happens when you live in a building like this. The walls carry sound the way water carries salt, invisibly and completely. Yes, you say, the locked door. She looks at you directly, with the full weight of her attention, which is considerable. If something happens, she says, you come down, you come to me. It's not a question. It's a statement said in the voice of someone drawing a line in the world. If something happens, you come down to me. Yes, you say. She nods. That's the whole of it. You wash the cups. You put out the lamp. In the dark, you lie on the cornhusk mattress while the building breathes around you. The Greenbergs' Friday prayer from below. Not Friday prayers tonight, just evening, someone reciting something by memory. The Ferrara baby, quiet at last. A door on the 3rd floor opening and closing with its specific creak. Carmela is asleep beside you, her arm flung out. The photograph of your mother is against your ribs. The cold thread of air comes through the crack in the wall. Tomorrow you'll stuff it with more newspaper. The newspaper will go in, and the moisture will work at it, and it will fall out again, and you will put in more newspaper. But right now the cold moves across your face in the dark, and it is cold, and it is November, and it is there. And also, the visiting nurse is coming back on Wednesday. And the petition goes in Monday morning, and Emilio's cough is quieter. And the COS food allocation means 2 weeks of not choosing between potatoes and coal. And Miss Whitfield wrote down the landlord's name in her notebook, and you're here. The week passes. November becomes December. The crack in the wall is repaired, not quickly, not without a second visit from Miss Whitfield, and a letter from the COS to the building's owner, and a strongly worded note from the city tenement inspector. But it is repaired in the 3rd week of December by a man with a bucket of plaster and the attitude of someone doing a favour rather than a job. He plasters it in 5 minutes, says nothing, leaves. The draft stops. The floor stays dry. A small thing. In the scale of the problems in this building and this neighbourhood and this city, a very small thing, but that night, lying in the dark with no cold thread of air crossing your face, you feel it. The absence of the draft. The wall closed. The room fractionally, specifically warmer. That's real. That happened. That is a thing that did not exist before and now exists. And the reason it exists is because you reported it, and Rosa reported it, and Miss Whitfield wrote it down, and the machine of the city was made, in this one gear, to turn in a direction it hadn't been turning. Not justice, but something. The machinery working slightly differently. The petition with 43 names goes in Monday morning, delivered by Paulina and 2 other women to Mrs. Stein's desk. The response comes Thursday. The piecework rate will be reviewed in the new year. Reviewed, not restored. Reviewed, not a victory, but not nothing. December has its own texture. The cold is full here now, not visiting anymore, but installed, resident, permanent until March. The street vendors have adapted. Canvas covers on the pushcarts, small braziers underneath for warmth. The market on Hester Street smells different. The vegetables giving way to things that keep in cold, dried beans and salt fish and potatoes in straw. The factory is warm, at least. The machines generate heat, and in December that heat is welcome rather than oppressive, and you arrive each morning grateful for it in a way you're not grateful in August. Esther, beside you, has been given the quality checks on finished bodies at the end of the row. She does it with the same quick precision she does everything. She's 16, and she has been here 6 months, and she is already better at the mechanical work than people who've been here 3 years. And you're not jealous exactly. You feel something more complicated, a mix of admiration and recognition, and something that is probably the beginning of genuine friendship. You should teach, you tell her one day during the not really break in the half English, half Yiddish that has become your working language. When you're done here. She looks at you with her quick eyes. Done here when? When you're a teacher. She laughs, short, bright. Teachers go to school first. School costs. You know that. She knows that. The women on this floor who are going to teach or nurse or do other things will do it the long way, the night school way, the years of saving way. Still, you say. Still, she agrees. Christmas in the tenement is different from Christmas in Calabria. Not worse, not better. Different. Rosa makes the best dinner she can manage within the budget, which this December is slightly more generous than last year because Emilio is working again. Properly working, the medicine having done what it was supposed to, the cough reduced to something occasional and manageable. 5 fish, and it counts. Wine from a bottle Mr. Kaplan places on the table without ceremony, the way you'd place a stone. The children receive small gifts. Carmela gets a book, a real book, not a primer, a novel from the second-hand stall on Canal Street in English, about a girl who runs away from home, which Carmela receives with the ferocity of someone who has been waiting for exactly this book. Giorgio gets a top that Emilio carved over 3 evenings, sitting at the kitchen table by lamplight, working slowly with his tools. Maria gets a corn cob doll wrapped in cloth, which she receives with the same intensity she gives everything, turning it in her fingers, studying it from several angles, considering. You give Rosa the lavender soap, you can't afford it, you buy it anyway. She holds it and looks at you, and her face does the thing that means she is moved, and that she is not going to say she's moved. She puts the soap away carefully in the wooden box where she keeps the things that are specifically hers. She goes back to the kitchen. That night, with the children asleep and Mr. Kaplan out celebrating with someone, you sit with Rosa and Emilio at the table with the last of the wine and the candles, and the apartment warm from the stove and from the bodies and from the particular quality of the night. Emilio telling a story about his father, who was a builder in the village, who built stone walls that are still standing. His voice in Italian is different from his voice in broken English, fuller, more confident, the voice of someone who knows all the words. Rosa listens. You listen. Outside, the city does what it always does on winter nights. Tavern noise from the street, a distant church bell, the clatter of a late wagon. The city does not change for Christmas. It is too large and too various to change for any single thing. But in this room, in this small kitchen, in this specific building on this street, it is Christmas. It is warm and lit, and the wine is not very good, and it is wine. And the people at this table are the people you love, and that is enough. More than enough. The new year comes. January brings cold thorough enough that the water in the basin freezes overnight again. You break it with your fist every morning without complaint, because this is January, and this is what January is. A new boarder takes the inner room when Carmela moves to a cot in the kitchen. A cousin of someone 20 years old named Angelina from Sicily. wary in the way of someone new to the city. You recognize it completely. You tell her, "It gets easier. Give it some time. You'll know the streets. You'll know the people. It starts to feel like home." She looks at you with the expression of someone who doesn't believe that yet. She will. The season turns. In the third week of March, on a Saturday afternoon, you are not at the factory. You left at noon, the usual Saturday half-day, and came home, went out again to the pushcart market on Hester Street, the pickle barrel where the vendor has known you for a year now and sets aside the kind you prefer. You're standing at the pickle barrel when you hear the bells, not church bells, fire bells, the specific urgent clang of the fire wagon moving fast from somewhere to the northwest. You look up, the smoke. Even from Hester Street you can see it, black smoke rising against the afternoon sky. Far blacker and faster than chimney smoke, the kind that means something has gone very wrong very quickly. The kind of smoke that has no ambiguity about what it means. Washington Place. You know it immediately, the way you know things you have feared without naming, that have lived in the back of your mind as background noise, as the locked door thought you've been carrying every day for 2 years. Washington Place. You leave the pickles. You run. The streets are already filling with people moving in the same direction. The smoke a beacon pulling everyone toward it, and you push through them. The cold air burning in your lungs, your boots loud on the cobblestones, and when you turn onto Washington Place, you see it. The building. Your building. The floor above yours and the floor where you work. 8th floor, 9th floor. The windows are open. The windows that are almost never open in March, that are kept closed against the cold, and through them, fire. And on the fire escapes, women on the ledges, and then you see things that you will spend the rest of your life trying not to see, and which you will never entirely stop seeing. You stand in the street, and you cannot. Around you, the crowd presses forward. You're not moving, because something has frozen in the centre of you. Some absolute core of comprehension that understands what is happening and what it means and cannot process it quickly enough to permit movement. The fire department arrives. The ladders go up. The ladders don't reach. The highest ladders in the New York Fire Department don't reach the 8th floor. You know this because you have climbed the stairs to the 8th floor every day for 2 years, and every day you've known, in the way you know the crack in the wall and the locked door and all the other background noise things, that the stairs go up and the ladders stop short. People in the street are shouting. Women near you are praying. A man is crying. You stand and you watch, and you cannot make yourself look away and cannot make yourself look. And you're doing both simultaneously, your eyes open and your mind already in the place it goes when the present is too much to be inside. It lasts 35 minutes. 35 minutes from the first fire bell to the last fire. 146 people in the building. The numbers will be in the newspapers tomorrow and in the days and weeks that follow, and they will be correct and they will be entirely insufficient. Numbers are always insufficient for this. Your friend Paulina is one of the 43 who signed the petition. Your friend Paulina is one of the numbers. You stand in Washington Place until after dark, with the crowd that will not leave, the crowd of people who have also lost something, who are also looking at the building and not looking away. The cold presses down. The smoke smell fills everything. The street is lit by gas lamps that came on automatically at dusk. The lamplighter working his way up the block as if evenings are ordinary, as if evenings continue as they always have. After, the days after, the newspapers, the hearings, the names listed, The city suddenly talking about locked doors and fire escapes and the 8th floor, talking in the language of outrage that you have been trying to give them for 2 years, in the language of petition and grievance committees and union meetings. The outrage is real. You believe it's real. And also, it is 2 years late. You go to the public memorial. 20,000 people in a driving rain. The umbrellas useless. Everyone soaked. The streets of the Lower East Side filled from building to building. Clara Lemlich is there. Rose Schneiderman is there, who makes a speech that you hear only part of, but which contains the line, "I have tried you, good people of the public, and I have found you wanting. A line earned. You stand in the rain. You think about Paulina at the machine next to yours, her dark circles and her sideways union talk, and her neat, careful script on the petition. You think about the petition. 43 names, reviewed in January. You think about the locked door. You go home. You climb the stairs. You sit at the kitchen table while Rosa makes the coffee. Spring comes anyway. This is the thing you don't expect, even though it happens every year. Spring comes anyway. The cold loosens first from the afternoons and then from the mornings. The air changes by degrees. One day you realize you haven't broken the ice in the basin for a week. The street goes through mud season and dries out, and the children who've been stacked up in the tenements all winter explode back into the streets with the energy of people held still too long. You go back to work, not at the Triangle factory. Triangle is shut. You find a position at a factory on West 14th Street. Similar work, similar machines, different building. On your first morning and every morning after that, you check the stairwells carefully. The wage is the same, $8 on a good week. The rent is still $12. The arithmetic is unchanged. But some things have changed. The union is larger now. The memorial and the fire and the hearings have done something to the city's tolerance for these conditions, given the reformers and organisers a specific thing to point to, a number that closes the argument about whether the conditions are that bad. The outrage is 2 years late, but it is real, and it is working. Emilio is healthy. The cough is gone completely by May. Carmela finishes 6th grade and is admitted to a continuation school on Henry Street that provides evening classes for working children. She works 3 days a week at a millinery shop and attends school 2 evenings a week and reads everything she can get her hands on with a velocity that suggests she's making up for lost time, though she's 12 years old and hasn't lost any time at all. Mr. Kaplan moves to Brooklyn in the summer. He shakes Rosa's hand when he goes, and yours, formally, the way he does everything. But his eyes above the handshake are warm with something unsaid. Angelina, the new boarder, is less wary now. She knows the streets. She knows the vendors by name. She knows when the potato prices go up on Fridays. She's becoming someone who belongs here. In September, you begin night school. The Henry Street settlement runs evening classes 3 nights a week. English, arithmetic, and on Friday evenings, civic education. What city government does. What the laws say about tenants' rights and labour practices. Miss Whitfield told you about it. You've been meaning to go since March. You go. The class is in a basement room at the settlement house. 12 people. The oldest a man of 62 from Russia, learning to read and write simultaneously, which he approaches with a deliberateness that makes you feel like you've been wasting your advantages. The youngest, 15, from Hungary. The teacher is Miss Garvey. Red hair, an Irish accent, the patience of someone who has been doing this for years and genuinely believes in it. She gives you a sentence on the first evening. I have the right to a safe and habitable dwelling. Read it aloud, she says. You read it. Again. You read it again. Now tell me what it means. You look at the sentence. You look at her. It means, you say, choosing the English carefully, that where I live must be safe, that this is not a favour, it is a right. Miss Garvey is quiet for a moment. Yes, she says, that's exactly what it means. Here is what happens to the building inspections. In the months following the fire on Washington Place, the state of New York passes a series of laws, the Factory Acts of 1911 and 1912, that are the most comprehensive workplace safety legislation in American history up to that point. Adequate exits, fire sprinklers in certain buildings, limits on hours that women and children can work, mandatory seats for female workers. A woman named Frances Perkins, who stood on Washington Place and saw what you saw, spends the next 20 years working on these laws and the ones that come after them. She eventually becomes the Secretary of Labor under Franklin Roosevelt, the first woman in a US cabinet, the architect of the New Deal labor legislation. Clara Lemlich continues organizing until she physically cannot, which takes considerably longer than the men who broke her ribs expected. The locked doors in garment factories are required by law to be kept unlocked. The buildings on the Lower East Side, the tenements, the dumbbell design with its air shafts that didn't ventilate, are eventually replaced by buildings designed under stricter codes, with windows that open onto air that moves, with indoor plumbing, with heat that comes from something other than a kitchen stove. All of this takes time, decades. None of it happens fast enough for the people who needed it in 1910, but it happens. The petitions and the meetings and the names written down in notebooks and the letters sent to building owners and the women who stood on picket lines in November cold. All of it accumulated. All of it added up. The arithmetic they were trying to make work, the one where workers' lives were worth something, where the cost of the locked door was included in someone's calculation. That arithmetic eventually, slowly, imperfectly, began to balance differently. You don't know most of that yet. You're in September 1911. You're learning to say I have the right to a safe and habitable dwelling in Miss Garvey's class on Henry Street. You're paying $12 a month for 2 rooms on the 4th floor of a building on Orchard Street. You're earning $8 a week on good weeks. You owe nothing to Conchetta this month. First month this has been true since you arrived. Your finger healed. The nail grew back slightly different. The keratin ridged in a new pattern. A small permanent record of the machine. Emilio is healthy. Carmela is reading. Maria, 3 now, says Foglia perfectly. The nights. Here is what the nights are like now, in the autumn of 1911, in the city that has shown you what it is. You lie on the cornhusk mattress. Carmela is beside you, reading by the last of the lamp. She does this every night, sometimes very late, the book propped against her knees, her eyes moving quick and quick across the page. You've stopped asking her to put it out. Let her read. Let her read all night. Let her read her way out of here. Maria is in the small cot. Angelina, the new boarder, is in the outer room. The building breathes. The Greenbergs' evening murmur from below. The Ferrara couple, quiet for once. The new family on the 3rd floor whose baby is finally sleeping. Mr. Kaplan is in Brooklyn now, but the sounds of other people's lives still fill the building with its particular sound. The sound of a lot of people trying to rest, not quite simultaneously, the building never fully going quiet. Your hands hurt in a low, ordinary way. The hands of someone who's been using them for 10 hours on a sewing machine. Not injured, just used. the specific ache of competence. You think, I'm still here. You think about Paulina. You think about the 40 cents you owed Conchetta, and the 40 cents before that, and the months of $4 weeks, and the weeks the machine didn't stop even when your hands did. You think about the building inspector who came and will come again. You think about the petition, 43 names, which did not prevent anything, but which was the beginning of something, which is different from preventing, and also real. You think, I have the right to a safe and habitable dwelling. Say it again. I have the right to a safe and habitable dwelling, and also the dwelling I have is not safe enough. And also I know that now, precisely in English, with the language to say it to someone who will write it in a notebook. And that is different from 2 years ago. That is the difference between arriving with 3 words and being here with enough. You stare at the ceiling. Carmela turns a page. The building breathes. Outside on Orchard Street, someone is still up. Very faint. Footsteps on the cobblestones. Unhurried in the late-night way of someone who is nowhere they need to be in the next 5 minutes. The footsteps fade and the street is quiet, and then distantly, 2, 3 blocks over, someone's voice. A fragment of song. Italian. A phrase you know from somewhere. A song your mother used to sing. A simple melody that has travelled across an ocean, that exists in the throats of people who left Calabria and brought it with them. That is here now in New York on a September night, moving through the dark air. You listen until it fades. Then there is only the building, the breathing, the pages turning. Sleep comes slowly at first, the way it does when the day has been too much to simply set down, your mind running its accounts, checking its calculations, making sure everything has been accounted for. The 40 cents, the $12, the crack that is now closed, the petition that was reviewed, the names in Miss Whitfield's notebook. Then it comes, the way it always comes, eventually, to tired hands and a used body in a room where other people are sleeping, where the building settles around you with its particular sounds, where the city outside is still going, will always be going, does not need you to keep going. Somewhere out there, the night shift at the factories that run through the dark, the watermen on the East River, the children who will wake up tomorrow and go to school and learn 12 new English words and come home and use them at dinner, correctly and not correctly, while their mothers correct them and their fathers listen. All of it continuing, and you, here in the dark, in the building that breathes, you are here. You've been here for 2 years and 6 months. You're still here, in a city that requires constant effort just to remain. That demands the full application of your intelligence and your body and your will simply to stay present in it. That gives you nothing except what you take. In this city, being still here is a kind of victory. Not the victory you came for, not the one they promised from the other side of the ocean, but the one that is real. You came with 3 English words and an address. Now you have enough. Not enough money, never quite enough money, but enough language, enough knowledge, enough geography. You know the streets, you know the people, you know the sound of the building and the feel of the machine and the specific quality of morning on Orchard Street when the pushcart vendors are setting up and the children are going to school and the city is becoming itself again, daily and actual and entirely indifferent to any individual part of it, and also not indifferent, never entirely indifferent, because you are part of it, one of the parts that does the work, one of the hands the machinery requires, and the hands know things now. The hands know the weight of bolts of fabric coming off a truck, The hands know how to negotiate with Concetta and talk to Graeber and make 43 names into a piece of paper and put it on a desk. The hands know the feel of a cornhusk mattress and a machine treadle and a pen signing a petition and a daughter's shoulder as she falls asleep against you in the amber light. The hands know. Let the sounds fade now. Let the calculation stop. Let the running account go quiet, just for tonight, just for these hours. The building will still be here tomorrow. The machines will still be there. The arithmetic will still be there, patient and persistent, waiting for you at 5 a.m. But right now there is only this: the breathing of the building, the turning of a page, the warmth of the body beside you, the city going dark outside, and then darker, and then the particular pre-dawn dark that is the city holding its breath before it starts again. All the people sleeping in all the rooms of all the buildings in all the streets that go from one river to the other, resting their hands and their backs and their calculating minds, getting the hours give them before the morning begins. You are one of those people. You are here, on Orchard Street, in the city that was promised and delivered and impossible and real. Warm enough, tired enough, present enough. You have earned this rest. Take it. Let the night do what the night is for. Let the calculation stop. Let the breathing slow. Let the sounds go under. Let the morning wait. Centuries from now, people will walk up 4 flights of stairs in a building on Orchard Street and stand in 2 rooms and look at a cast iron stove and a cornice mattress and a curtain across one corner, and they will try to understand what it was like to live here. They won't understand. Not completely. You can't understand with your feet on a preserved floor and the sound carefully absent. The sound of 6 people in a border and 40 families on the other side of thin walls, the sound of the building breathing. But they'll try. They'll stand in the room that was yours and they'll be quiet for a moment, and in that moment something will happen that isn't understanding and isn't not understanding. Something more like contact. Something like placing a hand on a cold wall and feeling that it is real, that it was always real, that the people who lived here were exactly as present and alive and calculating and tired and hoping as you are right now. That contact is real. The hands are always real. The rest is sleep. Good night.